Does this mean my attributes are a level above other players? As I pondered this, a notification popped up informing me that I had unlocked the Novice Guide achievement, earning 10 reward points. Meanwhile, Ziche reminded me that I could now exchange for a mid-tier blind box. Let's see what it holds. As long as it's not cough syrup, I muse. Soon, the machine worked to life, and I watched with a somber expression, uncertain of what it would dispense. The system informed me it was a muscle enhancement injector, capable of permanently boosting muscle strength, though its efficacy would diminish with each use. However, after being stored for 200 years in the shelter, could it still be usable? This caused a pang of regret, but I shrugged it off and decided to try it anyway. After injection, I felt no discernible effect, seemingly confirming that the drug had indeed expired. Suddenly, an inexplicable surge of energy coursed through my hand, leaving a tingly sensation. Once the energy dissipated, I felt invigorated and refreshed. Just as I was savoring this sensation, it vanished inexplicably. Was it truly an expired product? To be sure, I asked Ziche to conduct a full-body checkup. My attribute panel then popped up, indicating a 1-point increase in strength and constitution. Ziche explained that reaching this level of strength attribute would grant me twice the power of an average adult male. Since it hadn't expired, I decided to leave it be. I then inquired about the time. "It's already 4 a.m., answered Ziche, indicating that players would be able to re-enter the game in just an hour and a half. "Ziche, please make the preparations," I instructed. After Ziche left, the system unexpectedly updated my tasks, presenting me with 20 new daily quests, although the main questline remained unchanged, likely due to unmet conditions. 20 daily tasks would net me 150 reward points, but tackling them alone seemed daunting and exhausting. The game currently had only 35 pre-registered players, and if I wanted to attract more, I would need a novel promotional strategy. Advertising wasn't practical. The wrong kind of players, those seeking meals or finding the game dull, would create awkwardness. With this in mind, I decided that having players register accounts, providing phone numbers and mailing addresses, would help filter out those lacking commitment. So I posted a survey in the group chat. Meanwhile, in the real world, a notification from the group chat startled a woman, her pupils dilating in surprise. Relieved to see it wasn't a client urging her to complete an order, she was struggling for inspiration for her fashion design. Noticing the lively conversation in the chat, she decided to join in. The group chat was abuzz with excitement. As she scrolled through, she saw the reservation link I had posted, and curiosity led her to click on it. She skimmed through the game's introduction and found nothing particularly striking until she came across mentions of cosmetic surgery and cybernetic enhancements, trends currently all the rage in the fashion industry. Excitedly, she exclaimed, "I finally found my inspiration, this is just too cool." Without hesitation, she clicked the reservation button. Thus, the wasteland gained another curious inhabitant. To restore human civilization, I had summoned players from across various worlds through this game to join me in completing quests and rebuilding the wasteland. Feeling rather smug, I lounged back, pleased with the recent game survey one had published. As I glanced at the clock on my computer, it read 6 a.m. time to greet my cherished players. The players were already animatedly discussing their in-game attributes while ignoring their greeter, Ziche. Suddenly, Yishai, with a constipated expression, clutched his stomach and urgently asked Ziche about the location of the restroom, only to be told there was only a cultivation chamber and no restroom. Seeing this, the others quickly pulled him aside. Arriving at the scene, I found that Yishai had already soiled himself. In their eagerness to earn my favor, they stood to attention, expressions of reverence plastered on their faces. Observing them solemnly, I realized they had grasped the importance of earning NPC favor, as mentioned in the group previously. I then told everyone that as the temperature was about to drop, it was crucial to prepare food, drinking water, and fuel. Soon, we stepped outside the shelter, and before I could speak, the group unanimously suggested that building a toilet should be our top priority. They proposed that once the toilet was set up, we could dig a large pit, fill it with foliage and wood shavings, and create compost. Hearing this, I recalled that Bet Street seemed to collect both residents and livestock manure to sell to the nearby Brown farm, possibly as fertilizer. At this point, Fan Chung suggested sealing organic waste to create a biogas digester, where anaerobic bacteria would convert it into combustible methane. The produced biogas could be used to power a methane fuel cell, effectively turning the toilet into a power station. Although his explanation was somewhat beyond my grasp, the idea seemed promising and worth considering. Kwang Feng analyzed the situation, noting that we would need a considerable amount of sealable and storage materials. Fortunately, in the wasteland, Plastic, especially in the form of bottles and trash bags, was abundant. I then instructed them to search the outskirts of the city for the necessary materials and directed them to a notice board detailing tasks and rewards. The board listed 3 tasks: collecting wood, finding water storage containers, and gathering recyclable waste. As I finished speaking, Kwang Feng raised the topic of the generator, suggesting he had a faster solution. I encouraged him to share, and he asked if there were any cars nearby. Car generators, he pointed out, typically came equipped with them. There are some vehicles around, though I've explored them before without any finds. Still, I might try again, perhaps luck will favor us this time. Since you're so set on it, then go ahead. Just ensure you take someone with you. An encounter with mutants could be perilous. I insisted, entrusting Yishai to accompany him. We headed back into the shelter to kit them out with maps and equipment. At the cusp of leaving the novice zone, Yishai couldn't resist showing off to Fang Chong and Bairu, who merely returned the gesture with a raised middle finger. They followed the map to a parking lot 2 miles from the shelter, only to find it had already been picked clean. Seeing this, Yishai sighed, maybe we should head back. Yet Kwang Feng was resolute. We've come all this way, we shouldn't return empty-handed. He approached a car and, with all his might, tried in vain to lift the hood. Frustrated, he shouted, Yishai, are you just going to stand there? Come help! Wondering what Kwang Feng did outside of this world, Yishai eventually joined in, and together they managed to pry open the rusted hood. Upon seeing the engine riddled with rust and moss, Kwang Feng's brain was nearly exhausted from trying to identify the engine. Didn't you say you've driven before? Help me out! Kwang Feng insisted. Does GTA 5 count? Yishai quipped. At that, Kwang Feng felt as if a herd of horses had just trampled through his thoughts. After searching back and forth, Kwang Feng's confusion grew. He located the engine, but could not find a power source. Feeling disheartened, Yishai pointed toward a trash can and suggested, let's not waste any more time. It might have been scavenged long ago, let's see if there are recyclables instead. Just as Kwang Feng was about to concede, Yishai declared he'd made a significant discovery. Hoping for a generator, Kwang Feng ran over, only to find a sewer entrance. Despite the warnings, Yishai was eager to go down, seeing an opportunity for adventure. The more mysterious, the more worth exploring, right? Who knows, maybe a beauty awaits rescue, he jested mischievously. Although I can't condone your fantasies, there just might be a treasure chest down there with a generator, Kwang Feng replied. With that, they ventured into the sewers. While investigating some peculiar-looking mushrooms that piqued Yishi's interest, Kwang Feng cautioned, we'd better take them back to examine. If it turns out toxic, don't blame me. Eventually, they reached the sewer depths, where Yishai stopped dead in his tracks, trembling visibly, a red exclamation mark symbolizing his fear as the memory of an encounter with mutated eagles surfaced. At that moment, a beastly growl echoed from within the shadows, and Yishai bolted, leaving Kwang Feng convinced he'd lost his mind. Elsewhere, Fang Chong and Bairu were digging pits for toilets under the blazing sun, now drenched with sweat. Holding my nose against the stench, I informed them, there's a water source a kilometer away, you can wash up there. Additionally, urine is sterile and can be directly used on crops. Let's call it a day. Fang Chong proposed building a bathhouse. Our numbers might grow to include female players. We can't have them bathing outside, he remarked. Suddenly, cries for help interrupted Yishai, had narrowly avoided plunging into the latrine, only for an oblivious Kwang Feng to crash into him, sending both into the pit, mushrooms scattering through the air. Picking up a stray mushroom, it seemed they'd stumbled upon something of value. Later, I cooked them into a porridge indistinguishable from mung bean soup. Despite this, they ate as if starved, leaving me to wonder if it was my cooking. Puzzled, I asked Yishai, where did you find these mushrooms? Kwang Feng mentioned a marked spot on the map, near the sewers by the wetlands. Yishai inquired about the mushroom's edibility, speculating potential use as buff-enhancing drugs. You're overthinking it. This particular mushroom is commonly known as the Blue Angel. Unless you're immune to all toxins, consuming it would ensure you meet your angel within an hour. While inedible, this mushroom is the primary ingredient in crafting a radiation suppressant. Fortunately, you didn't encounter the leeches often found near it. Juvenile leeches pose little threat, but when fully grown, they can reach 3 meters and swallow a person whole. Upon hearing this, both were struck by the realization that they narrowly escaped death, leaving them deeply shaken. For discovering the leech's location, I've awarded you 200 contribution points. The harvested mushrooms are worth 20 points, totaling 220 contribution points. Seeing the 2 large bags of mushrooms, I noted that these could be sold at Bet Street's recycling station. Despite yielding only 40 chips there, their real value is at least twice that amount. I informed them of my departure to gather supplies and told them that Ziche would open the elevator at 5 p.m., reminding them to remember to return to the shelter on time and to ask Ziche if they had any questions. After my departure, they discussed among themselves. Fang Chong noted that the mushrooms were rare yet dangerous to harvest, yet they only earn a meager 20 contribution points, hinting at disparities. Typically, a player's task reward aligns with its difficulty. By this logic, you shouldn't have received such few points. It seems the tasks have priorities. What we did in the afternoon stemmed from NPC administrators adopting our opinions as subsequent tasks. By fulfilling shelter needs, actions correlate with contribution points, though the administrators' minds seem bewilderingly advanced. Could there be a grand scheme behind all this? Surprisingly, they speculated about my role as a wasteland game NPC. Fang Chong conveyed suspicion about my human-like behavior, conjecturing the possibility of a real person assuming my role. Hearing this, Yi Shai felt a chill, asking, could he be using me? Fang Chong assured him not to worry. Even so, he hasn't caused harm. He's even saved me. The main concern now is winning more NPC favor before the second beta test. Clasping hands, they shouted in unison to ensure other players have a higher starting point. Let's team up. Puzzled, Yi Shai asked, how do we form a team? Fang Chong explained on the spot, we'll share intel and each utilize our strengths. He instructed Kwang Feng and Yi Shai to scout the lakeshore of the wetland park and correct any incorrectly marked areas. Yi Shai was disdainful, feeling that the guy presumed himself the team leader. Fang Chong and Bai Ru proceeded to chop wood. Before long, evening had arrived. Meanwhile, Bet Street buzzed with activity. A woman clad in tattered black stockings and shackles approached. It turned out she was a slave acquired by Bet Street's mayor, and old Charlie eagerly greeted the newcomers, led by the caravan leader Lister from Giant Rock City's trading company. Upon my arrival, I noticed Lister again visiting, this time with his legend-clad, cultivated clone merchandise. Given the caravan's presence, this seemed an opportune moment to find a beer for the mushrooms, so I approached them before they departed. Do you have a moment? I have something you might be interested in. Lister paused, asking who I was. As they raised their guns, I raised my hands, clarifying, I mean no harm, just offering a trade, only to receive laughter in return. Trade? You think someone like you can trade with us? I laid the 2 large bags of mushrooms on the ground. Are you sure you don't want these? Lister took interest and inquired about the price. Nervously, I replied, 200 chips. Without hesitation, they agreed, suggesting my price was too low. These cunning merchants would surely sell them at a price 10 times higher. Predictably, he grasped my intent, proposing I purchase some of his wares, asserting their superiority to what Bet Street offered. I expressed an interest in purchasing a gun, and with a snap, he motioned for a subordinate to bring forth an old-fashioned rifle, handing it to me. After examining it, he demanded 200 chips. I asked for a discount, almost provoking a physical response. Compelled by the need to equip the shelter, I grudgingly thanked him. Thank you, Mr. Lister, knowing my forces lacked the power to resist. Anticipating my possible demise by monster encounter while foraging for mushrooms athwart adventure jeopardizing his profits, he elaborated on the monstrosity's threats, though I was already well-versed in the peculiarities of alien leeches. Patting my shoulder, he urged, by the end of the month, I expect to see what you promised. 40 pounds of mushrooms translates to 2,000 chips. If you need equipment, order from me then. With another snap, a subordinate presented a tablet for selection. Eyeing the valuable gear for sale, I noticed an elusive generator priced at a staggering 1,200 chips. I chose a suit of powered armor and equipment for 800, and together with the generator, it totaled my next month's mushroom sale earnings of 2,000 chips. After returning the tablet, he reviewed my chosen items, remarking, these aren't the sorts of things an ordinary scavenger can afford. When seen around town, how will you explain it? Rest assured, I assured him, I have no intention of bringing it back to Bet Street. He sneered dismissively, how you handle it is your concern. If you're discovered, I won't acknowledge any involvement. After the transaction, he prepared to depart. Unseen by the caravan, I gave them a middle finger salute. As dusk settled, I chose not to return to the shelter. The arrival of the caravan kept Bet Street bustling as usual. Citizens bartered relentlessly with old Charlie for winter supplies, nearly wearing him out. At this moment, a man holding a placard announced, the mayor's decree, every household must deliver 100 kilograms of wood and 2 pounds of fur by the end of the month. The crowd buzzed with dissent, and I suspected the mayor intended to profit by selling these to the caravan for a prosperous winter. Nevertheless, it mattered not to me, for I intended to leave before winter's onset. Approaching my home, I found Xiao Yu in an altercation with Wang Defu, the third son of the Wangs. He presumed my demise after my days-long absence, seeking to ransack my home, which Xiao Yu valiantly opposed. Xiao Yu shouted angrily, "Big brother isn't dead." Yet Wang Defu persisted, wanting to divide my belongings with Xiao Yu, who firmly told him to leave. When Xiao Yu's steadfastness proved unyielding, Wang Defu, gritting his teeth, moved to strike. I intervened, catching his fist. "You're the one saying I died?" Seeing my return, Xiao Yu, joyous, recounted how the scoundrel tried dismantling our home and sought to harm him. I pushed Wang Defu away, comforting Xiao Yu, "As long as I'm here, no one will threaten or harm you. Now, Wang, will you walk away or shall I make you?" Reaching for the steel pipe on my back, Wang Defu stammered in fright, vanishing without a trace. Gratefully, Xiao Yu thanked me, to which I sheepishly replied, "No need to thank me. Helping one another is all." But I couldn't shake the feeling Xiao Yu wanted something. Was it candy? So I offered him a lollipop, his face lighting up with glee. "Ah, is that what you wanted? Well, you've been brave. Take this as a reward." Then Xiao Yu's father and brothers returned. Nervously, Xiao Yu greeted them, then dashed home, prompting my curiosity. Were his parents forbidding our association? As they passed, the fisherman, Xiao Yu's second brother, commented, "I thought you were dead these past few days." A remark devoid of sympathy, his intuition was far from accurate. He regaled me with tales from town, suggesting a trek to the northern woods, where deer migration tracks were seen by the Lisan, opportunity for both fur and meat, though I declined. With others heading north to hunt, my concern was encountering them near the shelter. Noting my capabilities, he warned that the Wang family might trouble me, proposing a curious solution, marrying Xiao Yu to me immediately evening if I wished. Immediately, I retreated home, flustered by the absurdity. Marry a child. Visions of such a union with Xiao Yu, now a blushing bride, filled my mind. Despite her undeniable charm, the idea was unacceptable to me. After briefing the shelter's players on tasks, I ventured alone to Bet Street, entertaining a newfound fancy. Meanwhile, the players fretted over lumber recently harvested enough to reconstitute the convalescent home's northern and western wings. If rains came, though, unresolved what issues would quicken its decay. Fang Chong queried Bai Ru for solutions. For Bai Ru, acquainted with construction, it posed no challenge. Options varied: drying the lumber, painting ends to prevent rotting, plunging it in water for slow curing. Fang Chong mused about the prevalent concrete debris across this wasteland, suggesting a mix with the cement. While Bai Ru and the others deliberated, Yishai and Kuang Feng returned with news of significant finds. Yishai set down a bucket of items, displaying their map markings, crosses denoting discovered monster lairs and circles for safe zones. Fang Chong inquired, "What's in the bucket?" Kuang Feng replied, "It's mud suitable for construction, so we brought it." Bai Ru assessed it, deeming it for killmaking, but more was required. Bai Ru instructed them to fetch more, while he and Fang Chong resumed chopping wood. Elsewhere, Kuang Feng and Yishai were pursued by a two-headed bear. Suddenly, Kuang Feng stumbled, facing imminent peril, when I awoke abruptly, just a nightmare. Outside, Xiao Yu's voice called, asking if I was home. Emerging from the room, I asked his purpose. Xiao Yu presented a paper-wrapped biscuit, saying it was for me. With a blush, I asked, "Is this for me?" taking it eagerly. He hinted slyly and I leaned closer. Whispering, he confessed it was crafted personally by his second brother. I sighed, realizing the brother's unwavering determination to see Xiao Yu wed to me. Our pleasant chatter was suddenly interrupted by two unwelcome guests, the Wang family's eldest son and Wang Defa, perpetually irked by my presence. Passing without a word, their actions spoke volumes in provocation. Sending Xiao Yu back home as I prepared to leave, he urged caution, promising to guard the homestead until my return. Ruffling his hair, I thanked him kindly. Though Xiao Yu was young now, in a few years, marriage might become plausible. In this treacherous wasteland, survival was paramount. To gather winter supplies, I headed to Bet Street's recycling station, purchasing necessary provisions, 7 kilos of food and half a kilo of tobacco, spending my last 21 chips with old Charlie.